Hi Dad, I thought it might be nice if I read you a book. I found one about a medical examiner. It's called Working Stiff, 2 years, 262 bodies and the making of a medical examiner. It's a New York Times bestseller. Chapter 1 is called This Can Only End Badly. I shall begin. Remember, this can only end badly. That's what my husband says anytime I start a story. He's right. So, this carpenter is sitting on a sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan with his buddies, half a dozen subcontractors in hard hats sipping their coffees before the morning shift gets started. The remains of a hurricane blew over the city the day before, halting construction, but now it's back to business on the office tower they've been building for 8 months. As the sun comes up and the traffic din grows, a new noise punctures the hum of taxis and buses, a metallic creak, not immediately menacing. The creak turns into a groan and somebody yells. The workers can't hear too well over the diesel noise and gusting wind, but they can tell the voice is directed at them. The groan sharpens to a screech. The men look up, then jump to their feet and sprint off, their coffee flying everywhere. The carpenter chooses the wrong direction. With an earth-shaking crash, the derrick of a 383-foot-tall construction crane slams down on James Fryerson's head. I arrived at this gruesome scene 2 hours later with a team of MLIs, medical legal investigators from the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner. The crane had fallen directly across a busy intersection at rush hour, and the police had shut it down, snarling traffic in all directions. The MLI driving the morgue van cursed like a sailor as he inched us the last few blocks to the cordon line. Medico-legal investigators are the medical examiner's first responders, going to the site of an untimely death, examining and documenting everything there, and transporting the body back to the city morgue for autopsy. I was starting a month-long program designed to introduce young doctors to the world of forensic death investigation and had never worked outside of a hospital. "Doc," the MLI behind the wheel said to me at one hopelessly gridlocked corner, "I hope you don't turn out to be a black cloud. Yesterday all we had to do was scoop up one little old lady from Beth Island ER. Today we get this clusterfuck." "Watch your step," a police officer warned when I got out of the van. The steel boom had punched a foot-deep hole in the sidewalk when it came down on Frierson. A hard hat was still there, lying on its side in a pool of blood and brains, coffee and donuts. I had spent the previous 4 years training as a hospital pathologist in a fluorescent-lit world of sterile labs and blue scrubs. Now I found myself at a windy crime scene in the middle of Manhattan rush hour. Gore on the sidewalk, blue lights and yellow tape, a crowd of gawkers, grim cops and co-workers who kept using the word clusterfuck. I was hooked. "How did it happen?" my husband TJ wanted to know when I got home. The crane crushed his head. He winced. "I mean, how come it toppled over?" We were at the small playground downstairs from the apartment watching our toddler son Danny arrange all of the battered plastic trucks and rusty tricycles in a line, making a train. The crane was strapped down overnight because of the hurricane warning yesterday. The operator either forgot or never knew, and I guess he didn't check it. He started the engine, pushed the throttle, and nothing happened. So he gunned it, and the straps broke. "Oh man," TJ said, rubbing his forehead. "Now it's a catapult." Exactly. The crane went up, hung there for a second, and crumpled over itself backwards. Jesus. What about your driver? "What do you mean? Was the crane driver hurt?" "Oh, I don't know." "Well, what about the other workers?" "I don't know," I repeated. "None of them were dead." TJ was looking off into the trees. "Where did this happen?" "I told you, on 6th Avenue. "And what?" "I don't remember. What does it matter? You're going to avoid that corner because a crane could drop on your head." "Well, it doesn't happen that often, believe me." Our raised voices had drawn the attention of the other parents on the bench. "Civilians," TJ warned under his breath, reminding me that no one on a playground full of preschoolers wanted to hear our discussion over a grisly workplace accident. "Did he have a wife, kids?" he asked quietly. He had a wife. I don't know about kids. My husband looked at me askance. Look, I don't deal with these things. The investigators take care of all of that. I only have to worry about the body. Okay, so tell me about the body. As part of my medical school training, I had done autopsies before, but they were all clinical, patients who had died in the hospital. I had never seen a corpse like this one. We had to do a full autopsy because it's a workplace accident. It was amazing. He was a big guy, muscular. No heart disease, vessels clean, not a scratch on his limbs or torso, but his head looked like an egg you smash on the counter. We even call it an eggshell skull fracture. Isn't that cool? No, TJ replied, suddenly ashen. No, it isn't. I'm not a ghoulish person. I'm a guileless, sunny optimist, in fact. When I first started training in death investigation, TJ worried my new job would change the way I looked at the world. He feared that after a few months of hearing about the myriad ways New Yorkers die, the two of us would start looking up nervously for window air conditioners to fall on our heads. Maybe we'd steer Danny's stroller around sidewalk gates instead of rolling over them. We would, he was sure, never again set foot in murderous Central Park. You're going to turn me into one of those crazy people who leaves the house wearing a surgical mask and gloves, he declared during a West Nile virus scare. Instead, my experience had the opposite effect. It freed me, and eventually my husband as well, from our 6 o'clock news phobias. Once I became an eyewitness to death, I found that nearly every unexpected fatality I investigated was either the result of something dangerously mundane or of something predictably hazardous. So don't jaywalk, wear your seatbelt when you drive. Better yet, stay out of your car and get some exercise. Watch your weight. If you're a smoker, stop right now. If you aren't, don't start. Guns put holes in people. Drugs are bad. You know that yellow line on the subway platform? It's there for a reason. Staying alive, as it turns out, is mostly common sense. Mostly. As I would also learn at the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, undetected anatomical defects do occasionally cause otherwise healthy people to drop dead. 1 in a million fatal diseases crop up, and New York has 8 million people. There are open manholes, stray bullets. There are crane accidents. I don't understand how you can do it. Friends, even fellow physicians, tell me. But all doctors learn to objectify their patients to a certain extent. You have to suppress your emotional responses, or you wouldn't be able to do your job. In some ways, it's easier for me, because a dead body really is an object, no longer a person at all. More important, that dead body is not my only patient. The survivors are the ones who really matter. I work for them too. I didn't start off wanting to be a forensic pathologist. You don't say to yourself in 2nd grade, when I grow up, I want to cut up dead people. It's not what you think a doctor should do. A doctor should heal people. My dad was that kind of doctor. He was the chief of emergency room psychiatry at Jacobi Medical Center in the Bronx. My father instilled in me a fascination with how the human body works. He had kept all his medical school textbooks, and when I started asking questions, he would pull those tomes off their high shelf so we could explore the anatomical drawings together. The books were explorer's charts, and he moved with such ease over them, with such assurance and enthusiasm, that I figured if I became a doctor, I could sail those seas with him. I never got the chance. My father committed suicide at age 38. I was 13. People kept coming up to me during his funeral and saying the same things. I'm so sorry. I hated that. It roused me out of my numbness to anger. All I could think to say was, why are you saying you're sorry? It's not your fault. It was his fault alone. My father was a psychiatrist and knew full well, professionally and personally, that he should have sought help. He knew the protocol. He had asked his own patients the 3 diagnostic questions all of us learn in medical school when we believe someone is having suicidal ideations. First, do you want to hurt yourself or kill yourself? If the answer is yes, then you are supposed to ask, do you have a plan? If again the patient answers yes, the final question is, what is that plan? If your patient has a credible suicide plan, he or she needs to be hospitalised. My father's suicide plan was to hang himself, an act that requires considerable determination. After he succeeded in carrying out that plan, I spent many years angry at him for betraying himself and for abandoning me. This personal experience with death did not cause me to choose a profession steeped in it. I came through a career performing autopsies in a roundabout way. When I graduated from UCLA Medical School in 1996, I wanted to be a surgeon, and I began a surgical residency at a teaching hospital in Boston. The programme had a reputation for working at surgery trainees brutally, but the senior residents all assured me, conspiratorially, that the payoff outweighed the short-term costs. You work like a dog for 5 years, tough it out. When you're done and you become an attending physician, you've got it made. The hours are good, you save lives all day long, and you make a lot of money doing it. I bought the pitch. Before long, I started noticing that many of the surgeons' offices had a cot folded away in the corner. Who keeps a bed in his office? Somebody who never has time to go home and sleep, that's who, a veteran nurse pointed out. My work week started at 4:30 on a Monday morning and ended at 5:30 Tuesday evening, a 36-hour shift. A 24-hour shift would follow it, then another 36, and the week would end with a 12-hour shift. I got one full day off every 2 weeks. That was the standard 108-hour work schedule. Sometimes it was worse. On several occasions, I was wielding a scalpel for 60 straight hours, relieved only by brief naps. I clocked a few 130-hour work weeks. TJ started buying lots of eggs, red meat, protein shakes, boxes of high-calorie snack bars he could stick into the pockets of my lab coat. He had to cram as much food into me as he could during the pre-dawn gloom of breakfast, and again when I dropped into a chair at the dinner table, still in my dirty scrubs the following night. During my 15-minute commute home, I'd often take cat naps at red lights. I'd just close my eyes for a minute and wake to the sound of the guy behind me laying on his horn, the light green. Boston is TJ's hometown. His family was overjoyed when we moved back there from Los Angeles. We were 18 when we started dating, college freshmen, practically high school sweethearts, and had entered our 20s happy and serious about each other. I wanted to get married, but he had begun to have his doubts. He doubted, I later found out, that he wanted to be married to a surgeon. I was fading into a pallid, shuffling spectre, and was steadily losing the man I loved, and who loved me. Then, one day in September, I fainted on the job at the end of a 36-hour shift. I dropped to the linoleum right next to a patient in his sickbed, and awoke on a gurney being wheeled to the emergency room, an intravenous glucose drip in my arm. The diagnosis was exhaustion and dehydration. The head of the residency programme, my boss, came in and stood next to the IV drip bag, obviously impatient, but not visibly concerned. "Okay," he said, "you're just tired. Go home, take 12 hours off and sleep. Drink plenty of fluids, all right?" I was in a daze, wiped out and ashamed, and could only nod back. "I'll get somebody to cover your next shift," the surgeon told me, his back to my bed as he hurried out the door. As soon as the boss had left me alone in that ER bed, I was no longer ashamed. I was infuriated. Nobody should be expected to practice clinical medicine, much less perform surgery, on the 3 hours sleep I had been living with. But I had wanted to be a surgeon since I first picked up a scalpel in medical school. I had been in the operating room and watched lives saved, and wasn't ready to give it up just because my body gave out on me one time. I went back to work. Less than a month later, I was forced to consider the hazards my patients might be facing at the hands of their exhausted doctors. The hospital pharmacy paged me during morning rounds. When I called in, a woman's voice asked, "Do you really want to put 200 units of insulin in this patient's hyperol, doctor?" I'd had a full night's sleep and was alert as I ever got to be, but I still blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "What? No, that would kill a horse." Hyperol, short for hyperalimentation, is a type of intravenous nutritional supply that puts food energy directly into your bloodstream. Oh, Dad, I think that's probably what you're having. It has to include a carefully calibrated number of insulin units, 15 or 20 units for instance, so that your body can maintain its healthy cycle of fuel storage and release. If instead you were to receive 200 units of insulin, you would pass out from hypoglycemia and die within minutes of a fatal cardiac arrhythmia, a terminal seizure, or both. I didn't write that order, did I? "What's your name?" "Dr. Melanek." "Melanek, let's see." There was a shuffling of papers on the end of the line. No, the woman replied, and I was able to breathe again. Okay, how many units of insulin did the patient get in his hypal yesterday? 20 units. And the day before? 20. Let's just make it 20 units then. Right, confirmed the pharmacy technician who had just saved somebody's life. The doctor who wrote that order during the last shift was a fellow surgery resident. He had almost killed a patient by writing an extra 0 on a nutrition order. I didn't fill out an incident report about the near-fatal mistake. Nobody had been hurt and nobody had died, so there was no incident. During one of those 130-hour work weeks, had I hurt patients without even knowing it? Had I killed anyone? The end of my surgical career came 3 months later when I caught the flu, ordinary seasonal influenza, and tried to call in sick. There's no one to take up the slack this time, my boss scolded, as though my trip to the hospital ER in September had been some kind of shirking ploy. I swallowed 2 Tylenol, stuck the rest of the bottle in my pocket and went to work. The shift was a blur. The Tylenol wore off after a couple of hours and I started shaking with chills. I took a moment to slip into an empty nurse's alcove and measure my temperature. 102. While I was gulping 2 more pills, an emergency came through the door. A young woman with acute appendicitis. Somebody thrust the medical chart in my hand as I followed the gurney down to the operating room. The patient's fever was 101.2, lower than mine. My hands didn't shake. I opened her up, tied off the appendix, cut it out, and sutured the site of excision. The room was swaying and I was sweating in sheets, but I took a deep breath, focused all my attention on the needle, and finished stitching. That was the 61st operation I performed during 6 months of surgical residency, and the last. The minute I scrubbed out of the operating room, I told the chief resident I was too sick to work and had to go home. Don't feel so bad, she tried to comfort me. I once had a miscarriage while on call. I called TJ, feverish, despondent, bawling. When he arrived at the resident's call room, he closed and locked the door without a word. Then he crouched down by my bunk and asked, "Do you want to quit?" I confessed that I did. "Good," TJ said with conviction. "You should." "But what are we going to do? What hospital is going to take me off if I quit?" "Doesn't matter," he said. "Not anymore. Quit." He was right, it didn't matter. All that mattered was getting out of there. I resigned my position as a surgery resident the next day. TJ and I started spending time together again. On Valentine's Day of 1997, we were walking down a street we'd traversed on our first date, 9 years before to the day, back when we were teenagers. When we reached the spot where we had first held hands, he stopped, took both of mine and lowered one knee to the icy sidewalk. I was surprised, delighted, giggling helplessly. "Would you give me an answer? Yes or no?" he pleaded. "My knee is getting cold." I was happy for the first time in nearly a year, but scared too. I'd learned only what kind of doctor I did not want to be, and was convinced no hospital would take me as a new resident in any specialty now that I was damaged goods. The happiest I'd been in medical school was during the pathology rotation. The science was fascinating, the cases engaging, and the doctors seemed to have stable lives. The director of the pathology residency programme at UCLA had tried to recruit me during my last year of medical school. No, I told her back in the day, driven and cocksure. I'm going to be a surgeon. More than a year later, I called her to ask if she knew of any pathology jobs anywhere for a failed surgery resident. "Can you start here in July?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "Judy, I'll keep a pathology residency position for you right here at CCLA if you start in July. Even more shocking was TJ's enthusiasm for the idea. "You'll be leaving your family behind again," I pointed out. "Doctor," my fiancé replied, "I've followed you to hell and back. I'll follow you to Los Angeles." Okay, chapter 2. They'll still be dead tomorrow. It's no big deal if you don't have a birth certificate. Other forms of identification will suffice to secure a job, open a bank account, even file for Social Security. However, if your survivors cannot produce a death certificate after your demise, they will descend into bureaucratic purgatory. They can't bury your body, transport it across state lines, liquidate your investments, or inherit anything you have willed them. That death certificate comes from a forensic pathologist. Pathologists study the causes and effects of human disease and injury, all sorts of disease, all manner of injury, in every part of the human body. As a resident physician in pathology at UCLA, I spent 4 years studying what every single cell, tissue and structure in the body looks like. On top of that, I learned what all the things that go wrong look like and how to tell them apart. A forensic pathologist is a specialist in this branch of medicine who investigates sudden, unexpected or violent deaths by visiting the scene, reviewing medical records and performing an autopsy, all while collecting evidence that might be used in court. Like a clinical pathologist, she has to recognise what everything in the body looks like, but the forensic pathologist also has to understand how it all works. She has to know how all the things that go wrong with the body can kill you, and all the ways that trying to fix those things might also kill you. The forensic pathologist is the medical profession's eyewitness to death, answering all the questions, settling all the arguments, revealing all the mysteries contained in the human vessel. One day too late, my clinician friends like to joke. Forensic pathologists work for either a medical examiner's office or a coroner. The latter is an administrator or law enforcement official, often the sheriff, who investigates untimely death in his or her jurisdiction. The coroner hires doctors to perform autopsies, but these doctors usually don't play an active role in the investigation beyond their work in the morgue. A medical examiner is a physician trained specifically in death investigation and autopsy pathology, who performs both the prosecution, Latin for cutting apart, and all other aspects of the official inquiry. The ME is always a doctor and often trains other doctors as well in a 1-year fellowship programme that follows 4 years of residency training in hospital pathology. I ended up training at the New York City office of Chief Medical Examiner because I wanted to escape a mandatory month-long forensics rotation at the Los Angeles County Coroner's notoriously grim office. They only give you decomps and car accidents, I'd heard fellow residents complain. What do you expect? That's what they've got over there, the UCLA chief resident pointed out. I always enjoyed stopping by this doctor's desk because he had a passion for forensics, and the academic journals he collected featured articles like heroin fatality due to penile injection and sudden death after a cold drink, compared to those titles apoptosis in non-tumorous and neoplastic human pituitaries, expression of the BCL2 family of proteins, didn't stand a chance of holding my attention. If you really want to learn forensic pathology, do a rotation at the New York OCME, my chief resident advised. All kinds of great ways to die there, and the teaching is brilliant. That's where I did my FP rotation, and I loved it. Moved to New York for a month? Why not? TJ, to my surprise, said the same thing when I proposed the idea to him. I was pregnant with our first child, and he had decided for both financial and family reasons to become a full-time stay-at-home dad. This liberated us to move wherever we wanted, whenever we needed to, without struggling to reconcile our career goals. Babies are portable, he pointed out. So in September 1999, 6 months before Danny was born, we flew out to New York, and I took up a visiting rotation at the Office of Chief Medical Examiner. By the end of that month-long assignment, I had decided that forensic pathology was the career for me, and that the New York OCME was the place to pursue it. I enjoyed the intellectual rigour and scientific challenge of death investigation. Everyone there, from new students to the most senior doctors, seemed happy, eager to learn and professionally challenged. None of the medical examiners had cots in their offices. There were no emergency autopsies, another resident pointed out to me. Your patients never complain. They don't page you during dinner, and they'll still be dead tomorrow. I completed the application for the full 1-year fellowship at the New York office as soon as we returned to LA. 4 months later, while I was on maternity leave, I got a call from Dr. Charles Hirsch, Chief Medical Examiner for the City of New York, offering me a position as an assistant medical examiner starting in July 2001. My first day on the job, I woke before dawn in our Bronx apartment. TJ snored softly on one side of me, and Danny, by then 16 months old, echoed his dad from a bassinet on the other. I listened to the traffic heading for Manhattan just beyond the window and reverted to an old vice, biting my nails as I worried whether I had made another life-altering wrong turn, this time with a husband and child in tow. I left the apartment early, wanting to give myself plenty of time for the commute to Grand Central Station from Spuyten Duyvil, where the Henry Hudson Bridge arches out of the Bronx to plunge into the green mound of Inwood Hill. At Grand Central, I descended with the crowd to the Lexington Avenue subway and emerged at 28th Street, growing more nervous as I walked east into the summer sun. A few blocks I came to a corner, and there it was, 520 First Avenue. My new place of work was a Soot Street blue cube trimmed in dingy aluminium and crowned with a naked boiler, its fiberglass insulation flapping in the wind. The front door hid in the shadows behind a web of rickety scaffolding with great chinks showing half-painted, rusty bars between uneven boards. This squat eyesore was the office of Chief Medical Examiner of the City of New York. The security guard looked up when I entered the lobby. High-relief stainless steel letters on the wall above her read, Tacient colloquia, effugat risus, hic locus es ubi mors gordesh circular vitae. I stared at the words. Can I help you? The guard asked, and when I told her my name, her face lit up. The new pathology fellow? Welcome aboard, Doc. Something in me had frozen. 2 weeks before I'd been living the good life in Los Angeles. I'd finished my formal medical training and was a full-fledged physician. I could have taken a nice mellow laboratory job anywhere in the country and sat behind a microscope all day looking at slides, making diagnoses on paper. Instead, I had uprooted our family to the unforgiving city where I grew up, a harsh place that held bad memories. And for what exactly? The security guard's expression softened. It was clear she had greeted a lot of stunned people walking into that building. She glanced back at the polished silver motto and said, "Let conversation cease, let laughter flee. This is the place where death delights to help the living." 2 of us stood alone in the cool, quiet lobby. "Oh," I said at last. "Welcome to the OCME, Dr. Melanek." The guard held out a sticker that read Visitor. Dr. Mark Flomenbaum was their Deputy Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Charles Hirsch's right-hand man and my immediate supervisor, so I was surprised when he greeted me with a hug. 6'2", with a long, gentle face, round glasses and immense hands, Floem was famous around the office as a karate champion who broke boards for fun. He introduced me to the MLIs and the identification staff on the first floor, then showed me upstairs to the office right across from his own that I would share with the 2 other fellows in forensic pathology for the year. Dr. Stuart Graham was already settling in. Stuart had spent 15 years in private practice running a clinical pathology lab in Florida until he decided to branch out. I mostly sat at the microscope or reviewed charts in the blood bank. I don't think I performed more than 1 autopsy a month for over a decade. "We'll fix that," Floem said cheerfully. Stuart had a bone-dry sense of humour, a sliver of a drawl, and a fondness for bow ties. He and I were destined to share adjoining desks in the fellows' room, our swivel chairs butting against each other. The office held a third desk behind a cubicle divider for Dr. Doug Freeman, a lanky man with long legs in a slow stride and wavy blonde hair tied in a ponytail. He seemed like a genuinely nice guy of the Midwestern mould. Floem explained that Stuart, Doug and I would spend that first week of July going through administrative processing, which involved fingerprints, a physical examination and a pile of red tape paperwork. When that was done, we would each be issued a badge, an ornate shield set in a heavy leather wallet. He looked at his watch. "Okay, it's time for morning. Hirsch rounds. Let's go down to the pit." Nobody seemed to know who had dubbed the autopsy suite the pit. It isn't a pit. It is, in fact, a remarkably neat and tidy place. 8 parallel stainless steel autopsy tables, ample, well-scrubbed and shiny work surfaces with raised edges like a ship's gunwales, line one wall of the long room. A high-powered dishwashing sprayer hangs behind each table and metal slats support the body, allowing blood and fluids to drain into a shallow catch basin underneath. This leads directly to a biohazard sink, and if the case is a homicide, its drain remains plugged until absolutely all bullets, knife points and other foreign objects have been accounted for. I was informed that hapless junior medical examiners have had to take apart the drains after they inadvertently flushed a piece of evidence. Right, that's half an hour. I will start again in a new video.